Good afternoon, everyone. Dale Calder back. Today I want to get straight into the other forces role, which is, of course, linked to the Freedom's Call roles. I'm not going to give any real sort of intro at all. I'm going to deal with that directly. We'll see how we go on time on this. I've got quite a lot I want to cover relating to this role because it is a singularly large role, along with the second NZEF role. And so there are things here that we need to be aware of and the essential differences, if you like, as to where I've come from with regards to this role. If time permits, we'll get on to the familial role. If I can't do that, just because I think it's really getting too long, then I'm going to leave off on that, and we'll do a short video on it, or we'll hook it in with the one that we do on the quick flit through the website. So with that said, okay, the other forces role, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a role which has really developed again over time, but not like the second NZE role at all. It was never my intention really to do a role other than the second NZEF role. But somewhere along the line I probably came across a newspaper clipping here and there, thought, oh well, I'll just take note of that name, who knows, maybe I can create a role at some future date. It may have come off perhaps a cemetery record, but again, some of the info was pretty skimpy there. But as I was going through all of the military records there anyway, why not, these sorts of things. So, well, what's basically happened is with the passage of time, I have been able to provide this listing, and I call it a role because it is that, but it's somewhat less sophisticated than the second NZEF role, and there's some very important different points that you need to be aware of about it. And I think first and foremost is that with the second NZEF role, I set down certain specific criteria. And one of them was that the service personnel, of course, had to be members of the second NZEF, which meant they had to have served overseas. Now, the problem we have when we're getting into Air Force records and Navy records, they're so skimpy, unless one was to perhaps request an individual serviceman's or woman's record, you're going to find very little about them. There's no equivalent, if you like, of a nominal role or an embarkation role, not as regards the Air Force and the Navy. So very, very skimpy records. And so that's why this thing really has just gradually come to light as a result of the like of newspaper clippings that I may have picked up, cenotaph entries, and then with the passage of time, more recently as a result of having looked at some gravestones, for example, up in Manu, I've already done two quite big photo ops up there, for want of a better expression, and I'll probably be going back for a third. So this is, we'll never ever get all these people who should be on this role on it. I know that there's no ifs or buts about that. We're just not going to get them. And that's because of the information that I'm having to pluck from different sources. But I did want you to know that fact. Now, so the problem we have, as I say that, we just don't know whether these people have served overseas or not. In one or two instances, we're not even absolutely sure that even though they have served with the second NZ AF, say, that they actually saw active service during World War II, although their age would suggest that that indeed was the case. So if later on I find that to be the case with one or two entries, they will be removed. But for the moment, virtually everyone that you see on here will have served either with the second NZAF, with the with the Royal New Zealand Air Force, not the second NZA, the Royal New Zealand Air Force, the Royal New Zealand Navy, or the New Zealand Merchant Navy, or one of the overseas forces. And you'll see how I've denoted those when we look at the spreadsheet. So, and of course, in the case of RNZAF, those pilots that did serve overseas, those people that did serve overseas, a lot of them ended up being seconded into the RAF as well. Now, as a result of what I've put together with this particular role, and my visits to cemeteries and the like, and checks of, I upload, of course, when I went to the cemeteries and took so many photos, I also uploaded those onto the Find a Grave site. So I have also been, with the passage of time, providing information through to the Auckland Cenotaph, the Auckland War Museum Cenotaph staff, for which they've been very grateful. They vetted those and then put them up there. And there's a batch currently with them, being slowed down because of the COVID-19 thing, and several more batches I've got here ready to shoot off as and when they finish with the current one. So that's what we are looking at here. So very important that you understand that this is really a listing of of RNZAF, RNZN, RN, RAF, and other records. And that's about as much as I can say about it. Did they serve overseas? Yep, some of them definitely did. Some never returned from overseas, and we'll talk about that too in a minute. But there may be some who did only serve here in New Zealand, and I have no way of knowing if that was the case. So straight into the spreadsheet itself, where that person does appear on the Cenotaph database, that has been duly noted in column A, and there will be more that are currently showing up with an N that will be changed to Y once the museum staff have uploaded the information that I've provided them with, and this will continue certainly over the next few months, and possibly even over the next few years. So we then have, of course, a surname, Christian name column. The forces that they went away with is denoted either against a blue background. You will see an N. That's against a light blue background. A yellow background with an A means that it was Air Force, and if you just see a white background with the word Army, that means they were with one of the overseas arms of the forces, such as the British Army, maybe Fijian Army, Australian Army, American Army, Canadian, whatever. The Polish Army could be, that's really just what that denotes. And there are quite a number of people in that category. Of course, you won't find those entries up on the Cenotaph because these people were not New Zealand soldiers at the time of the war, but they did serve, and for that reason I've decided to list them here also. But as I say, we haven't really done justice to the many graves and that I'm sure lie around Northland for these men and women. There is an alias column, but there is no duplicate column entered for these people. The rank is shown where it is known, and sometimes, as I say, that initially may have come off a newspaper record perhaps, then later when I've gone to the gravestone I find a different rank there. In that case I've taken the one that's on the gravestone or grave plaque as being the correct rank at date of death. The branch of the forces, well, here we go, Royal New Zealand Navy, Royal New Zealand Air Force, Royal Air Force, Royal Navy, US Merchant Marine, British Army. There's a whole heap of different things here that you will see. Fiji, Royal Navy. Now, one of the problems that we do have with the Merchant Navy, and this certainly applies as regards whatever is submitted up to the Cenotaph, we don't always know, of course, whether this person served with the Merchant Navy here in New Zealand or with the US Merchant Navy, with the British Merchant Navy. Sometimes the service number gives us a clue. I'm looking at one here, a gentleman, Noel Balderston. He has a service number 13807. Now, that would suggest that he was with the New Zealand Merchant Navy. If he'd been with the British Merchant Navy, chances are you would have seen an R in front of that, but not absolutely conclusive. then you'll see a column showing where that person died, and that may show somewhere here in New Zealand, but there are a number of entries here you'll see where the person has died overseas, and being in the Air Force, that's been in countries like, as far as the Air Force goes anyway, you'll see countries like England, Belgium, and there are several like Germany showing up in this column as well, the Netherlands. In the case of Navy, perhaps in one of the oceans, the Atlantic Ocean, I'm looking at one here. Some you've just got Europe generally showing us Europe. I do have one in the Royal New Zealand Navy here, for example. I'm looking at actually who I believe hit a mine off Bream Head in New Zealand here in 1941. So that person features. Whether they saw service overseas, I don't know, but they're here. And sometimes you will get some very specific description. I'm looking at one here which says Bumper Castle, Yorkshire, England. So that's where that person died. Then you've got the usual birth and date columns. They follow on fairly similarly to what you saw on the big roll. Same sort of principle, bluing out as and when I am able to ascertain the date of birth. The entries in yellow are those men, mainly men I think on this roll, who, I think all men on this roll, who just did not return from overseas. And there is also a column, very few entries here, but there were a few of these men also who were taken prisoner of war. To date, there may be more that will end up being in that column as well. I do not believe from memory, though, that they are on the prisoner of war list. I think I've just limited that to 2nd NZEF personnel. Then we have the actual cemetery where they lie, whether it be here in New Zealand or whether it be overseas. I'm looking at one here who did not return, who lies in the Topcliffe Church Cemetery, Yorkshire, England, grave 9. Another one here in the Hanover War Cemetery, Hanover, Niedersachsen, Germany, 1F10 is the reference. But there are many here in New Zealand, lying in New Zealand plots, those who returned from the war. And where we don't have a plot, sometimes we may just know of a cremation, then I have noted it as cremated at such and such a cemetery, and that's been the sole entry. We also have entries for, again, just like we did with the big roll, for Find a Grave and billiongraves.com, so you're able to see here, and surprisingly I found as a result of that little photography excursion, I did just so many, and indeed even just traversing through the websites, the Billion Graves and Find a Grave websites, just how many of these men showed up here. It was a very fruitful and worthwhile exercise. And then off to the right, of course, you've got further information about these people. It follows again a very, very similar pattern. First of all, you've got any gallantry awards showing up, and incidentally, I would mention here that one of the, I think there were about 14 or 20 odd, I just can't remember now how many persons, New Zealanders to date, have received the Victoria Cross, and one of those does feature here, Lloyd Trigg, who was with the RNZAF, and so you will see him in here, and you can find further information about that particular pilot should you wish to go search him online. There are many sources where you can learn a little bit more about him, but the people also here with other gallantry awards. So those awards, they would show up in blue, as I said last time when we went through the big roll. They'll show up in blue on the left-hand side of the other column, other details column, and then if other kin, very close kin served, they will follow on from there, and you will see, a notation like brother of so-and-so who served in the 2nd NZEF, for example. And then we come on with the other details with regards other next of kin, son of so-and-so of Welsford, and other general information. I'm looking at one here, place of birth Papakura, attached to the Royal Air Force, a 104 Squadron, memorials listed on cenotaphs. So that's the information that we have on that. Some of these people, many of these people, of course, as you will appreciate, were not born in New Zealand, particularly if they served with the likes of the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force, and perhaps the Merchant Marine, or indeed with the British Army. So many of the entries here, you will not find them on the birth index in New Zealand. So there's lots and lots of information here, and again references to genealogical records where appropriate, and crediting where I think appropriate too, because there have been some people, some who are members of this group, who very kindly have found out details here and there for me, and I'm very grateful for that information, and it has been added in here as well. So that gives you a little bit of an insight there. Now, just a word on women. Sometimes in the course of looking at cemetery records, you would come across, say, a serviceman. And let's say we found a chap and he had served in the 2nd NZEF, for example, but his wife had served with the WAF, with the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. That may have been overseas, it may not have. But the only record that we have for that particular person, for the wife, shows up in her married name. I've been unable to ascertain her maiden name. Perhaps they married after 1940, so I've been unable to pick them up on the marriage index. In a situation where I just do not have a maiden name, then this woman has been shown with her married name only. I just want to make that very clear, and you may see then the next of kin showing, being her husband or something like that, possibly. You know, he may have served, he may not have served, but they simply make the point that just because we're looking at an entry here doesn't mean that the person, that woman served under that name. This may only be, this is very, and all too often is just her married name. Okay, I think we have covered pretty well everything I wanted to cover with that. Not quite sure how I'm looking for time here. I've done about 17 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to very, very quickly now take a look at the family member serving role. And as I mentioned to you before, there are two areas here. One for the 2nd NZEF, which is the first half of the role, and I won't go back over the keys to these roles, which I've covered with you before. The second half of the role covers the other forces. Now, and I just want to give you a little bit of an example how this might shape up when you're looking at things. I'm going to take two brothers here. So if you, for example, were to look at, and these are Whangarei men, I knew both of them. One Walter Russell Adams, also known as Wink Adams. Now you'll see him on the 2nd NZEF roll. Here you will see him up on the 2nd NZEF Roll of Honour as well. And we see the name Walter Russell Adams entered. Everything's got a white background on this particular roll with his service number, and then in blue off to the right hand side, Leonard Mountain in brackets, Len Adams, NZ 412822, close brackets, brother, with brother inserted in brackets. So we can see immediately the relationship thing is showing up there. Walter Russell, 2nd NZEF, so he's in red. Leonard Mountain, Len Adams showing up in blue. Now, when we go down and look at Len Adams in the other forces role, and I'm going to scroll down there now, we just see more or less the reverse of that. So we've got Leonard Mountain Adams showing up in blue here with his service number in the left-hand column, and then to the right, in red, Walter Russell, Wink Adams, 1074 brother, and it's in red because that person happens to be on the 2nd NZEF role. There will be occasions, as I think I've mentioned to you already, but you're going to see situations where sometimes you'll see people on the same role, You know, you might see a husband and wife, and they, and particularly so in the case of British servicemen, sometimes you know, a man and his wife serve with the British forces. It's not uncommon to see that. You may find some brothers served in the Air Force, some served in the Army. You may have a mix, so you may see red and blue colours off on the right-hand side there. And as I think I said to you before, if you see black, an entry in black in that right-hand side, that simply means that yes, that person served, but they may not necessarily have served overseas. And there may not be a link to Northland either. But they did serve, and so that relationship is acknowledged, and the fact that they did see service. So, and again here, because of what I've just told you about the other forces role and the and how it has been often difficult to ascertain a wife's maiden name, I'm talking about a wife now who also saw service, you may find that the entry here on this other forces role is only in the, well, it will only be in the married name if that's what was showing up on, for example, the other forces role, because you're basically mirroring the surname and the Christian name on this particular role. So that's, yeah, I really didn't want to get into a lot more detail on that. I've already spoken about the keys that you can see when you look at the left-hand side, or both sides, you'll sometimes see little notations in brackets, KIA or KD Pow, Dow Pow, died of wounds, prisoner of war. And these little keys just tell you how that person happened to die, sadly, overseas. Sometimes it just may say KONS, killed on active service, KOAS or something like that, and it's not much more specific than that. So those two roles, they're in alphabetical order. They're building all the time, and it's just surprising. Every now and then I'll come across another one. Hello, here we go. This guy's a brother of so-and-so, and I got him on this role. And it's brilliant because you can really start to see, you can see the degree of sacrifice that families made when their boys, their daughters, even husbands and wives and what have you, went off to war. It's pretty staggering. So with that said, thank you very much. You will have seen I put up a little post today, and that relates to my last, was it my last one or the one before that? No, my second to last video that I put up regarding cemeteries Urupus. I would ask that you have a read of that. It was very, very interesting. That information came through from a fellow researcher, a chap by the name of Mark Kavanagh, and it's to do with Urupus, so I hope you do go and take a read of that. Very, very interesting to read it, and I thank Mark for that contribution, and also for the fact that he is so very enthused about everything that's occurred as regards the Freedom's Call website and the roles, and I thank him for his compliments that he's given me. So okay folks, I think that's enough. I'm going to wind this up now, and tomorrow that means that we're going to be able to take a look, and it'll be a much more brief video, and hopefully the last one you'll see for some time, when we just take a quick look back at the second NZEF, or rather the Freedom's Call website, and we just quickly take a look through the various menus, sub-menus, and I'll draw your attention to certain things that we haven't really discussed so far. I won't really go over all ground. I can't see the point in that, but there will be a few things there that I think may interest you, and we'll take a look at those in that next video. So once again, thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate all of you taking the time to look at this, who do. And please, as with this video, any of the posts, please share the hell out of them. I really want to get the word out about this role. It's a culmination of many years of effort, and it would be such a pity if it just ends up lying buried. And the only way that the awareness is certainly increasing. Every day there are more and more people coming to me, emailing me, texting me, messaging me about this, and they're so so absolutely blown away by what they see. But look, I know that we've got what 100, I think, likes now, 100 followers of this page. Really, if everybody just got out there and let it go out to their friends, anyone who lives in Northland particularly, we should have 1,000 people following along here, and I think that's good. And then going off to research the roles for themselves. So once again, thank you. Stay safe, and I'll be with you again in the not too distant future. Thank you.